Hi, welcome to DIY Family Projects. If you stick around, I'll show you how to install a simple irrigation drip system for your garden. My name is Aldo, and I'm with HomCo Lumber and Hardware. I'm in the plumbing department with HomCo, and this week's project is going to be how to install a simple irrigation drip line. So the purpose of an irrigation drip system is basically simple as this: to conserve water. Is to apply water directly to the plant or shrub or tree that you're providing water to, and not to have an overflow or a waste of water. And that's basically what a drip system is to get the right amount of water to the right place. First, let's talk about what is important that we're going to need. As far as supplies are concerned, we're definitely going to need what's called poly tubing. There's 1/2 inch and 3/4, but today we will be using 1/2 inch. And this is where the water flow is going to be flowing to. Next, as the water is carried through the poly tubing, we are going to switch to micro tubing or 1/4 inch tubing, which will take the water directly to the plant itself. And along with that, we have connectors as well. We have 1/2 inch connectors that will connect the tubing to each other. We have what's called T's that will actually start splitting the tubing so you can format your project or whatever you have there. Today we're going to be using the drip system where we're going to be connecting it directly to the faucet, to your garden faucet instead of underground, but we'll talk about that later. We also have these clamps or staples that will go ahead and staple this to the ground so it's just not flowing around. We also have these stakes, which the emitters, where the water comes out, will be staked to in front of the plant directly. We also have what's called a figure eight. It looks like a figure eight, and that's going to be used at the end, and I'll show you later for that. Also, we have these coupling connectors. This will connect the actual tubing to the poly tubing itself. And last but not least, we have what's called the emitters. This is important because there are many different kinds of emitters, and the emitters actually tell the plant and water how much to come out. As far as tools are concerned, we will be using hand shears or hand pruners, quite simple, and that will be to cut the tubing and micro tubing. We'll be using a tool that's a hole puncher, and this will be punching the holes into the poly tubing to make the connections. Or you can also use what's called a PVC cutter. This can actually also cut the tubing itself. So you can cut it with a variety of things, but we're going to be using today a hand pruner. So we've talked about the purpose of an irrigation system using the drip system. We've talked about the supplies and tools that we will be needing for the job. And next, now we're going to show you how to install one. And again, there are many forms, many types, many sizes of a drip system. But today, we're just going to keep it simple so you can get an idea of how it works. So first, we need to find out where the water source is coming from. And today, just to keep it simple, we're going to be using a connector that's going to go directly to your hose bib. So the faucet outside in your garden, we're going to just connect to that. And again, you can go underground, above ground, but today, again, we're just going to go above ground and keep it simple. So we're going to be using a hose connector that will connect directly to the hose bib. And from there, as you can see, the water flow will start flowing on this poly tubing. And I'm going to use this as a reference, as I mentioned before. But you can see we just did a quick layout, just a quick W layout here. And let's just assume that there's plants in between in these open areas right here. So as we flow the water through here using 90-degree elbows, T's, more elbows, we're going to lay it out very simple. And at the very end, we need to cut the water off so it doesn't keep flowing. And that's where the figure eight comes in, as we described earlier. So as we pinch it, and that will stop the water from flowing. So at that point, now we're connecting the micro tubes or the 1/4 inch tubes. Using the connectors that we showed you earlier, these little connectors, they're actually called barred couplings, but I'll just call them connectors. So as we punch the holes into the tubing using this tool, we basically just hold the tube into the U-shaped opening, staple it, and there's already a hole put there. And using these connectors, they just slide right in and they pop right in there, just like that. There's no glue in the drip system at all, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But as you can see, that is where the tubing starts to flow. So using the 1/4-inch tubing, this will take it directly to your plant. And again, there's many types of tubings, but I just like to keep it simple using the 1/4-inch micro tubing. And that goes right to the plant itself. And if we had, let's just say, 4 plants, we would just draw 4 little areas right here. And these micro tubings will take it directly to the plant, so there's no wasted water. So after we lay out the pattern of the poly tubing, the micro tubing is going to take the water flow directly to the plant. So we have 2 different ways we can do this. One, we can use the micro tubing itself, as it's shown here, directly to the plant. And I'm going to use this piece of wood as an example. If this piece of wood was an actual plant, the micro tubing is going to go directly right to the base of that plant, where the emitter, where the water flow is going to come out, and we'll talk about that at the end here. You can position the micro tubing 1 on each side of the plant, so you'll have 4, or you can just have 2. And another method is using what's called a tech line micro tubing. What this does, you can actually wrap it around the plant several times, and they have built-in emitters every 12 inches here. So depending on the plant itself and how much water it needs, that's going to determine what kind of emitter is being used. And I have, as an example, a 2 gallon per hour. I also have a 1 gallon per hour, and I have one that's adjustable. So it's very important that we determine how much water this particular plant needs. One major mistake that a lot of homeowners do is they think that all their plants need the same amount of water, and that's not necessarily true. As I mentioned before, each plant is different. As an example, say we have 2 plants here that require more water than, let's say, this plant here or this plant here. As you can see, I did the tech line micro tubing around, and it has different emitters every 12 inches on the micro tubing. Same with this one here. We wrap this one twice, where this one is just 1.5. And that way this will get more water than, say, this plant here that only has an emitter that brings out 2 gallons per hour, and another one here that requires 1 gallon per hour. So it's very important that we determine and put the plants in the right place with the amount of water that's necessary for each plant. And once we get the layout, and it's quite simple really, but once we get it out and everything's where it needs to be, we could actually stake it down with these items called staples. These staples, you can put these every foot or every 6 feet, depending on your need and how it's designed. But you can see that they just kind of go right over it. You kind of hammer it in or step on it into the soil, and it'll keep it staked down so you can, if you have a pet or something, they can walk over it and it's not going to drag it out of its position. And also with the micro tubing, you could also staple these down as well, or you could actually use a stake. This stake, which pops in like this, can go around your plant, and you can stake it around the plant so this is off the ground. I think it's important that these emitters are off the ground, whereas these emitters don't really necessarily need to be off the ground, and that way they don't get soil or mud and it starts to clog. But once we stake it down and everything's ready to go, there are a couple of things I do want to mention that are super important. I think a lot of homeowners and make the 2 major issues that can cause problems with you later. And one is, it's very important that we use what's called a regulator. The regulator is attached to the garden spigot like this, and you can put it right about here after it's connected. And what it does, it's going to regulate the amount of water coming out of the faucet. Every home is different. Usually it's between 50 and 75 psi coming out of your home. So when you turn that faucet on, the pressure that comes out, with that water flow and pressure that it's coming out, is higher than how this is functioned. This functions about 20 psi, and that's what these are. These are 20 psi's, and we also have some that are 15 and 25 psi, and you put those here, so as you open the water up, you're not going to start popping microtubes and emitters off, since no glue or PVC cement is required in the assembly of the drip system. This is why it's important that we use a regulator so you don't start popping off things, and it's going to be frustrating for you later. Also, the other item is it's important that we have a filter. What the filter does, it's going to hold the debris back so you don't get debris or a buildup of calcium all throughout the system here. And as we put the emitters on with time, all that debris and calcium buildup will get into the ends of these emitters, and the water won't come out. It'll start to clog, and that could also be frustrating. It's quite simple, really, and you could actually flush them out. You can pop these off, and you can flush the water out, replace the emitters, and put them back on if you need to. Everything is very simple. You can replace things, but that's basically the function of a drip system. I know it sounds maybe a little overwhelming, but it's quite simple once you get the hang of it, and once you start the process, you'll see that it's easier than it looks. Once you get started installing your drip system, I know in the beginning it sounds complicated, it may be overwhelming, but it's really not. Once you get started and you start putting it together, you'll see how easy it really is. And it's more, once you start it, you'll see what I'm talking about. But if you kind of stumbled and you have questions, come see one of our employees at HomCo in the plumbing department, and we can definitely help you out and point you in the right direction. But again, once you get it installed, you'll be glad that you did, because in the end, the whole point is to conserve water and not waste water. You can pick up your supplies at our HomCo lumber and hardware store, and we offer curbside pickups and free in-town delivery. And again, if you want more information, you can see us at myhomco.com.